So I have to first acknowledge our colleague Rosa DeLauro, who's here with us from Connecticut, because yesterday was a great day for Connecticut. And quite honestly, tonight might be another good day as well. If the women's basketball team from Connecticut can match the men, it will be a clean sweep by the great state of Connecticut. And having watched my Stanford Cardinal fall to the women at Connecticut, I can tell you they're a darn good team, darn good team. But we're here to talk about how else we can win for America. And the conversation we had today with a number of experts on the issue of the economy and moving us forward, telling us how important it is for us to do something very simple that we know readily every time we go to work and we go back home, and that is to respect each other, to elevate each other, and to try to make it so that when we move forward, we move everyone forward. And we know in America that if women succeed, America succeeds. If the middle class succeeds, America succeeds. Yet, too often, we see that corporate America is doing well, but not all of the middle class. We see that a lot of executives are doing very well, most of them men, but too much of the middle class, too many women aren't quite there. It happens that this is the anniversary of President Kennedy's signing of the Equal Pay Act 51 years ago. Back in the 1960s, 1963 to be exact, women made about 59 cents to the dollar compared to men. That's gotten better. Obviously now it's 77 cents to the dollar, but that's still 23 cents for every dollar that women are being shortchanged compared to our male counterparts. And so we got to get up. We got to bring everyone forward. You don't win as a team, and the Connecticut men's team proved that yesterday, and could be that the Connecticut women's team proves that today. You got to do this as a team together, lifting everyone up. And so we're here to say that an agenda that works for all of Americans must include all of our female breadwinners, all those who are out there working very hard every day. Everyone who gets up in the morning should have a right to say, I'm going to earn a dollar for a dollar's work, regardless of my gender. We also think that it's been clear that too many folks in the House, and I'd say on the other side of the aisle, have been AWOL when it comes to trying to help. When we have put up legislation, the Paycheck Fairness Act, to get us to the point of saying that women will have that opportunity to know that their government, their policymakers are behind them, Republicans have been AWOL in the House of Representatives. Just yesterday, the Senate passed on a bipartisan basis, 59-38, legislation to reinstitute emergency unemployment insurance for Americans, men and women alike, who have lost their job through no fault of their own. Where are our House Republicans and the House Republican leadership? They are AWOL. We've had for 9 months legislation to reform our broken immigration system sitting in the House of Representatives. Where has the Republican leadership been here in the House? They've been AWOL. It's time for us to get up and get our work done and do this for all America. Because when we all succeed, our country does very, very well. With that, let me yield now to our Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As was mentioned, today is Equal Pay Day. Every day should be Equal Pay Day. But the reality is that in America, the gap between women and men annually is $11,607 on average. And that's unacceptable. But I don't want to brag, but in my congressional district, women actually make more than men. In fact, 38,428 to 38,924. In fact, slightly more than men. But every congressional district should be reflective of my congressional district. The difference between what men and women do in terms of their efforts in work are no different, and therefore the pay ought not be different as well. I have a 13-year-old daughter. If anyone will ever suggest to her that her work effort or her work is any less than any man, watch out. And that's the way it ought to be. But we as a country could do more. We as a country need to do more. As Mr. Becerra said, when women succeed, America succeeds. There's no doubt about that. And in fact, the men of this country know that as well. The husbands, the sons, the fathers want equal pay for equal work for their daughters, for their wives. And so this is not an effort by the women of America, for the women of America. This is an effort by all of us, men and women together, to bring fairness and equity to the workforce and pass legislation that will actually make good on the promise of President Kennedy 51 years ago and actually provide equal pay for equal work. And with that, I'd like to call upon my good friend from the state of Connecticut. Now, they're playing the Irish tonight, so I'm not from Indiana. I didn't go to Notre Dame, but I have a little affinity towards that team, Rosa.
Change your affinity.
Change my affinity. Well, it may be a good thing that on Equal Pay Day that maybe there's some equity in terms of basketball as well. With that, from the great state of Connecticut, and she's the ranking member of the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education Subcommittee on the Appropriations Committee, Rosa DeLauro.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here with my colleagues today and with the great support for equal pay. This is a very, very simple principle involved in all of this, and that is that men and women in the same job should make the same pay. It's true for all of us. We come from different parts of the country. We have different skill sets, different educational backgrounds, and yet we are doing the same job and we get the same pay for it. And Equal Pay Day is a day on which women's earnings catch up to what men had made in the prior year. 77 cents on the dollar. On average, and this is true across occupation and education levels. And for women of color, it is worse. African American women make 62 cents on the dollar. Hispanic women, 54 cents on the dollar. And it shouldn't be this way when we are looking at what families are struggling with today. And this is not only for women. This is for families and where they need to be in order to take care of themselves, to be able to send their kids to school, to be able to get health care, to be able to afford child care, and why should women be shortchanged in this effort? Just a couple of points I want to make to you. And you know, we made enormous difference for women and families when we passed the Affordable Care Act in 2010. We said to insurance companies, you cannot charge women more than men for their insurance, for their health insurance. This is real. This is happening right now. And what we are suggesting is that we need to build on that. Let's make sure that employers cannot pay women less for the same job. That would be transformative. We're going to the White House in a little while because what the president is doing today, he is going to extend that protection of equal pay to millions of employees that work for federal contractors. And federal contractors hire at almost a quarter of the workforce today. And what he will provide when he says that federal contractors can no longer retaliate against employees who discuss their pay with one another, and he asked the Department of Labor to look at the compensation statistics from these federal contractors on sex and race and look at where those gaps are. He is providing women with the tools that they need in the workforce in order to be paid the same as a male counterpart for the same job. This is transformative. This is where we want to go, and this is the right thing to do. I want to thank my colleagues. Oh, I'm sorry. And let me introduce to you the chair of the Democratic Women's Working Group, someone who has very strong child care legislation, has been working in these areas for a long time, understanding the needs that family have, and that's Congresswoman Donna F from Maryland.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rosa. And thanks for pointing out that today marks the day when finally women actually are getting paid in the year for the work that they do. And it's rather startling. You know, when a young woman graduates from college and goes into the workforce, it is that point at which she is coming about as close as she's going to come in her entire lifetime of working to the pay of her peers along whom side she works, the men along whom side she works and has graduated. In the 4th Congressional District, in my district, women are paid about 97 cents on the dollar. But let's look at what that means, particularly for African American and Latinas. It means that African American women work for 64 cents on the dollar. Latinas work for 54 cents on the dollar. And so their pay actually won't begin for this year until about late April, early May. All of the rest of the year, they will have essentially worked for free. And it's really startling what that means in terms of a family's income, depriving a family of a quarter to a third of their income over the course of their lifetime, contributing to the negative impacts on their retirement security as they continue through the workforce and age. As a single mom raising a child, I know firsthand what it means not to be paid the same alongside my male peers, my counterparts who had the same education and same experience. It meant that my child didn't get the same benefits as other children might. And so this is true for women all across the country. And the consequences are really great. I mean, let's just take African American women, for example. They lose, in 2012, they've lost about $18,650 of their income in just that 1 year. For Latinas, they've lost $24,111 in the 1 year in 2012 because they're not being paid equal to their male counterparts. And so when I've joined with my vice chair, Doris Matsui of California, and our leader, Nancy Pelosi, and of course, you know, our godmother, Rosa DeLauro, in launching the Women's Economic Agenda. When women succeed, America succeeds. It's about putting together those pieces of an economic agenda that will make a difference for women and also make a difference for families. It is, as Rosa said, it is about quality, affordable child care. It is about making sure that we have opportunities for entrepreneurship for women. It's also about equal pay for equal work. And when we do that in this country, it will lift all of our boats. And so today, as we celebrate Equal Pay Day and 51 years since President Kennedy signed that into law, let's make it a reality for women workers across this country, that they can not only inquire about salaries, but compare those to their peers and then demand and be required to be paid equal to those who have the same education and experience. And with that, I'd like to introduce the vice chair of the Democratic Women's Working Group, Doris Matsui of California.
Use my box here. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks all of you for your leadership. Let me just say this. Can you believe that this is the year 2014, and we're still advocating for women, equal pay for equal work? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Women today have similar education, equal experience, equal training, but unequal pay. This is unacceptable, and really, I found out it wasn't always the case. One of the most endearing images of World War II is that of Rosie the Riveter, with her red bandana and her "We Can Do It" slogan. Recently, several of my California colleagues and I had an opportunity to meet some original Rosie the Riveters here in the Capitol. They really regaled us with their stories. But we were all shocked, too, when one of the Rosies made an offhand comment. She said, "We were paid 33 cents an hour, just like the men." Equal pay in 1944? When our nation put out the call for women to help with the war effort, these Rosies answered. They worked as hard as their male counterparts, and they earned the equal pay they received. Today's working women deserve the same equal treatment. This is a fairness issue and also an economic issue. The President and the Senate are taking action to address the pay gap. It is time for the House to do the same. We must act to put the money that women have rightly earned into their pockets. The House Democrats, when women succeed, America can succeed, is an economic agenda for families and women. And it includes the Paycheck fairness legislation. My colleagues and I will not stop fighting until this legislation is passed. In the words of Rosie the Riveter, we can do it. Thank you.
Well said, Doris. So let's take some questions and recognize that there's no reason why the House of Representatives couldn't do this today. There's no reason why people should get paid while they ignore the unequal treatment of women at the workplace. Perhaps we should tell many of our colleagues that they should forego their pay until they've gone through about a third of the calendar year, so they know what it feels like to be a woman working in the workplace in America today, or even worse if you happen to be an African-American woman or a Latina woman, to have to wait even longer. Maybe then our colleagues would recognize the sheer importance of putting a vote on the floor now to give every American equal pay for equal work. With that, let's take some questions. Yeah. Swing him.
Is it a disconnect, though, that when the White House is touting equal pay for equal women, their female staffers makes a $full-time to their male staffers?
One of the things I've heard that, but my understanding is, and I haven't haven't gone into great depth, but it is a question of the same job, same pay. And that is something that has to be looked at. That's what we're talking about in the Paycheck Fairness Act, is men and women in the very same jobs need to get the same pay. We all know what happened to Lilly Ledbetter. She had the same job as her male counterpart. And by the way, I think Goodyear's policy was that they couldn't have a conversation about wages. So after 20 years, from an anonymous tip, she was told that she was being paid less than her male counterpart. So the issue there is whether and what the descriptions of or so forth, or what if it's a cabinet secretary or a deputy secretary, or what it is that there is comparable pay, not comparable, equal pay, as we have in the House of Representatives.
I just want to say, I don't want to, I haven't looked at the White House salaries, but I don't think that any workplace is exempt from examining the pay of its workers and making certain that the women who work at the same job with the same experience get that pay. It's not an accident that in my district, the pay has gone up to 97 cents on the dollar for women. I come from a largely African-American district, and one of the reasons it's not a mystery is because in that district we have a high number of federal employees whose salaries are disclosed and who move at a pace in the workforce where there is comparability in terms of income and education. We have a highly unionized workforce where those issues are negotiated by the union. And so there are policies that can be put in place that enable the workforce and women to negotiate those salaries. But I don't think there's a single workplace that should be exempt from examining its pay and being required to make certain that that pay is equal for men and women.
Mr. Becerra or Mr. Crowley, this is a healthcare question since you both deal with ways and means here. In the doc fix a couple of weeks ago, there was a provision which some Republicans had pushed for, which was tucked into this, and we know the methods that was passed this provision a couple of weeks ago, that would change the deductible for some small business purchasing tools. What do you think about that when you've had the Republicans put so many bills on the floor to change or dismantle Obamacare, yet when it comes to that, they kind of embrace that because that was a provision they liked?
Go ahead. The let you beat up on them first.
Maybe it's a sign that they really will, in the end, try to work with us to try to make improvements to a very important bill, which we have always said will always need to be perfected. I hope it's a sign that rather than try to destroy and dismantle the health security that millions of Americans now have, that maybe there's a kernel of a sign from our Republican colleagues that they're going to try to work to make things better. We'll see. We still believe that there are going to be some bills on the floor this week and the weeks to come where Republicans will continue to try to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. We think more and more the American people are sending Republicans a clear message. Stop being AWOL. Get to work. Get things done. Stop just doing your social agenda and help us do the things that are important. Keep Americans working. Help those Americans who are looking for work, who ran out of their emergency unemployment insurance, to be able to get back on their feet again. Help women who aren't making equal pay get that fairness that they've never had. There are so many things we can do. Pass an immigration bill that brings trillions of dollars to our economy, reduces the deficits in the hundreds of billions of dollars over the next decade or two, and do things that Americans want us to do. And so hopefully this is a small sign that even if they have to do it in secret, behind closed doors, they're willing to try to do things that help improve the Affordable Care Act, not just always make it publicly clear that they want to dismantle it.
And I guess isn't that the point, though, that the way that the surreptitious fashion in which that was done, you say this might be the only time they've done it, but when they do it, behind closed doors and in the dark.
Maybe they're embarrassed or ashamed to actually try to get things done. They'd rather show their extreme right, their reactionary element of their party, that they're out there to bash as much as they can on the president. They're out there to stop as much as they can what the president's trying to do to get the economy rolling and Americans back to work and help the middle class. And maybe they want to keep hidden from the eyes of their far-right reactionary base what they're actually willing to do to try to make the law work.
I would only add that they don't always do things behind the scenes in closed rooms. In the budget that they've released, the Republican budget, they once again, they like the savings from the Affordable Care Act, they just don't like the act. So in this budget that they'll act on this week, they'll take the savings from the Affordable Care Act to balance their budget on the backs of the middle class Americans, but at the same time continue to reject the overall Affordable Care Act, all the benefits that therein lie. You can't just have a piece of the cake and say it's done. You have to take the whole cake, and they're just not willing to do that yet. But I think the more the American people come to realize the benefits of the Affordable Care Act, I think more of my Republican colleagues will also.
Yes.
As you mentioned, the president is going to take some executive action regarding equal pay, federal contractors. This follows something similar he did with minimum wage for workers for federal contractors. Should he take executive action on ENDA, executive action, LGBT workplace discrimination, protection against that for federal contractors? Is there frustration that he has it when he has on those issues?
Yeah, I know the president has taken a number of steps to try to make sure that this is a fair country for all. He did eliminate Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He has moved in ways that have made this a far more equal, far more equitable country. And I think that the president continues to hope that House Republicans will stop being the obstacle, will stop being AWOL, and help get these things done through statute, because he has only so much room to try to navigate in trying to enforce the law. And I think his difficulty is trying to give Congress the opportunity to do its work. If, unfortunately, Republicans in the House continue to be obstructionists and decide they'd rather be AWOL than get their work done, it would not surprise me if you see the president continue to use his executive authority to try to do things he can. They're only temporary because it's an executive act. They're only limited because it's an executive act. But talk to the women who will finally know that a federal contractor cannot underpay them for the same work they're doing that a man is doing. Talk to the young dreamers in America who today aren't facing deportation because of the president's executive action under the Deferred Action Program for young Americans. And you'll see that there are things that the president can do that are meaningful for the country, but it's no substitute. It is no substitute for Congress doing its work. And so we ask our colleagues on the Republican side, come back. You shouldn't be AWOL. Let's get this done, whether it's on ENDA, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on equal pay for equal work, whether it's on unemployment insurance for American workers who have been searching for a job. Let's get this done. Joe? Okay, one last question.
Looking back, if the JFK Equal Pay Act was signed in 1963, you were a baby in the crib. What do you tell your daughter as to why it's taking so long to balance this out?
I was a baby in the crib in 1963. In fact, I was a big baby in a very large crib, as my mother will tell me. I think it speaks of the time that Kennedy found himself in America post-World War II, the approaching maybe upheaval that was taking place in the country as well, and a recognition that certainly things had changed dramatically and we were living in a new world in many respects. And reflective of that was, I think, his attempt, a sincere attempt to bring about equal pay for equal work. In terms of the mores and the changes or the lack thereof that have taken place in the 50 years since then, that's up for sociologists and others to maybe examine. But what I can say is that the impact and the reality of that has been that women have been shortchanged over the last 50 years. And that needs to change. I think if President Kennedy were alive today, he'd be saying the same thing. I know that we, the party of President Kennedy, are proud of the work that he did 51 years ago to sign that bill into law and the work that was done in that Congress, that working Congress back then. But it also says that, just because something was enacted 50 years ago doesn't mean more needs to be done. The Civil Rights Bill was passed 50 years ago, and we continue to work on issues of civil rights. We are always striving for a more perfect union, recognizing that we're not perfect, nor will we ever be perfect, but we continue to work towards that more perfect union. And I think what's reflective today, looking back on those efforts, is that we always will have more work to do to make this a more perfect place. And my daughter lives in a better world today than maybe I was around as a baby in a crib. My mother was not treated the same way. I think that women today have been treated, and I think women are treated better today, but still not equal when it comes to pay. And I envision a world where my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter, Kenzie, will have an opportunity to work, make just as much as a man, if not more. And I think I'll be proud of that as well.
Thanks all very much.